Good evening to all those logging in India, and good morning in the West, and perhaps good evening or good towards the night in east of us. Uh, Today's webinar, hosted by the IIT ACB, is on a very interesting topic, perhaps not very glamorous in the world, but very uh, uh, necessary topic, that of supporting marginalized communities or disabled people, both in India and around the world. Prior to this webinar, I was chatting with Professor Balakrishnan, who is the webinar speaker today, and and perhaps he will talk about it, that the definitions of disabilities have also changed over the years from census to census. What I read was that in India that there were about 40 million people who were visually impaired, out of which 1.6 million were children. This is what I had read, but I think the definitions apparently are no longer the same, so the numbers might vary. To introduce both our speaker and our moderator today, Professor Balakrishnan teaches at IIT Delhi, did his graduation from BITS Pilani and then a PhD from IIT Delhi, and he's been there, I suspect, from the time he finished his PhD, and has done a tremendous amount of work in this area of supporting those who are less fortunate or disabled. Has won 3 national awards, and more interestingly, the ACM Eugene Lawler Award, which is given once every 2-3 years for the use of computer science and informatics for humanitarian contributions. And he's also received IIT Delhi's Lifetime Achievement for his work in the disability space. Moderating with him today is Professor Anil Prabhakar, who did his PhD in applied physics from Carnegie Mellon and has been at IIT Madras since 2002. Among his various interests, he's a part of the LIGO India board, which is the one that's looking at gravitational waves. So he's part of that board. He's a pioneer in quantum computing, founder of QNew Labs, which is in optical communications, and is the director of YALI Mobility and Enability Foundation, which focuses on rehabilitation engineering. So welcome to both of you. For our audience, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please do put in your questions there and not in the chat box. The chat boxes are not going to be monitored for questions pertaining to this webinar at all. So please do put all your questions in the Q&A box. As usual, I have to say that there is no certificate for attending this webinar. With that, Professor Balakrishnan, may I hand over to you for this. I also want to introduce my colleague Dr. Sushila Venkatraman, who will be there towards the end to wrap up this proceedings of this webinar. Okay, Professor Balakrishnan, all yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'll just get started. So by sharing my screen, so you can see the screen, so I can get started. Yeah, so today's webinar is going to be on the work that we have been doing for the mobility and education of the visually impaired. Of course, there have been a lot of let's say, ambiguity about the type of data, but we go by the references, the census 2011 data for us, though it's very widely known that this is quite an underestimate to the actual number of people. But visual disability is one of the very strong, let's say, disability among the population of the disabled. The 2011 data puts it at 5+ million, which is a very large number, and actual numbers could even be as high as 40 million if you include people with older age and so on and so forth. The focus of our work has been on independent mobility and education. Both of them are very fundamental. Education, we all understand in the type of world that we are living in. Without education, any type of livelihood is impossible. Even entertainment and so on and so forth today, you need to be educated to be, able to access many of the devices, many of the solutions, that can actually help you to live a life of dignity and live a life which is meaningful. Independent mobility is even more fundamental because if you do not have mobility, your chances of even getting education is very low. Imagine a situation where you are not very affluent, so you cannot afford any help for you to go to the school or a college. How do you actually get educated? Because considering the situation that we are in, mobility is also a very important aspect. So these are the two aspects that we decided to focus on as part of our work. Just broadly, so in terms of the outline for my presentation, so I talk about initially about the products and solutions that at Assistech we have been working on. Then briefly talk about some of the ongoing research, which will hopefully in the next few years see some fruition. Key learnings from this, if other people who are wanting to work in this space, what are the learnings that we have? And of course, acknowledgements, because clearly the work that we are presenting comes from contribution of many of my colleagues, students, mentors, and users. So what's the independent mobility challenge? The independent mobility, we all know, those of who have seen a blind person walking, they all walk with a white cane. And globally, this white cane is an extremely useful device used by the blind people for mobility. And it gives them independent mobility. You can see them walking independently without any support or any other person accompanying them. But the challenge is these canes are good to detect objects which are on the ground. They are good to detect objects which are below the height of the knee. If you have something which is projecting onto your upper body, which does not come into your normal walking path, a blind person is likely to get hit by this object, and it could result in very serious upper body injuries. So I just showing you a picture here, and there could be lots of such pictures. Our environments in the countries like India and other developing countries have lots of such unsafe objects. For example, it's very common that our corridors, we have air conditioners or room coolers sticking out onto the corridor and maybe even occupying a third or half the width of the corridor. And all these objects which just overhang and do not have a footprint on the ground are very dangerous. So they need to be detected. So this was one problem that was posed. Of course, if cane can detect objects which are lying on the floor, but what happens when the object is like this? It's not actually an inanimate object, but it's a dog sleeping or dog sitting. Very common on our streets. This is of course from IIT Delhi. And because my moderator is from IIT Madras, I also got a deer from IIT Madras. So these are objects which you can touch and you can know, but because you do not know where you are touching them and what will be their reaction, so they could actually react very violently. So there are two different problems that we try to address. One is knee above obstacle detection and another is non-contact detection. And throughout this talk, I will keep on reminding you that these are challenges which are very peculiar to our circumstances, and we cannot be relying on solutions coming from abroad. The first problem doesn't actually exist in urban infrastructure outside this, in developed countries like Europe or US, because this will be considered very unsafe to have such projecting objects. You cannot build a corridor and get a permission for a corridor of 2 meters and then block 50 centimeters or 60 centimeters using a air conditioner jetting out. That's just not possible. Similarly, you are unlikely to find dogs and cows on the streets in developed countries. So these are situations which are very peculiar to our countries like ours. And that's why we need to develop a solution, and solutions will not come from outside. So this was what was projected to us, and what we came out with is a product, which we call as a smart cane. It's an ultrasonic ranging device. It's 3 meters, vibratory patterns to warn the user of the objects. So in principle, it's a very simple device. It's you transmit an ultrasonic wave, receive it, find the time difference, and estimate the obstacle distance based on it. And users are always scanning it, so you will because the way that the cane is to be used is scan it in front of you, and so that automatically works as a scanning the path that you are. But a lot of it went into actually the engineering of it, which is suitable. It has to be a detachable handle because the canes are very inexpensive in India, but they are also not very high quality. If they break, I should not have to throw the device away. And people already use the cane with very different grips. At least there are 3 major grips, but there could be other grips also which are not so popular. And we needed to design something so that they don't have to change the grip they are using. And that was a very big challenge. So these were all, the second point I want to make is a very interdisciplinary nature of these problems. So when you want to solve this, you have to think in a very interdisciplinary manner. Either you have to have that particular expertise or you have to collaborate with people who have the expertise to help you solve this. Of course, it's a battery operated device and you have to charge it. So it has to be low power so that you don't need frequent charging. So these, of course, techniques are very well known in embedded devices. How do we make it low power? And we use all those techniques. So finally, we had this solution, but the journey was very long. And luckily, we finally got the support of Wellcome Trust UK, is a charity from UK which came to India with the Affordable Healthcare in India project. And we were one of the first to get funded in this. The development was a very long exercise. So this is again a challenge because of the fact, of course, one was our inexperience, I must admit. We have now done a product like this, but also working with students, and the students obviously have many other things to do, not just work on one project. We have many other courses. So, but we got a very, not only brilliant, but that's somewhat, we understood that if somebody is in our department is a very good student, but they were also very committed to actually seeing the product through. 3 years they worked, produced a lot of prototypes, improvements, user studies, but then we got stuck with funding. Almost 3 years it took to get a funding, which actually will also involve industry, because it was very clear to us that we could only do prototypes, but if you want to do mass production, we need to have an industry partner, and that took us quite some time. And finally, when we got the right funding through Wellcome Trust, which not only funded us, but also funded our industry partner, we were able to get the product out. And today we are very happy that it actually gets out of, this is a production line in Phoenix Medical Systems in Chennai, which actually manufactures this. So you can see this coming out of it. Of course, to make it popular, we had to do a lot of other things. We had to make a lot of documentation, manuals, braille manuals, audio manuals in different languages. And a lot of these we did also in partnership with other agencies. And today it's actually, I would say, a product which is available to users who want to use it. And also, as I later on will talk about it, around almost 80,000 units have been sold. And in India, and more than 2,000 units outside this country. So this is something which, what was unique about it? The other part, I talked about interdisciplinarity, I talked about our own challenges. When we started, there was no product, but later on we realized that there was a product which came out of a university in UK and was getting produced. In between it had stopped, it came into the market again. But the price of that product was 68,000 rupees. And we launched this product as 3,500 rupees. So affordability, and even at 3,500, it will be a handful of people who would actually be buying it themselves. So we have a huge market through the government, which government buys it and distributes it under the ADIP scheme. We have a lot of charities, 20% of the devices go through charities, which actually buy. So even 3,500 rupees, which looks to be, compared to definitely to 68,000 to be a very, and the functionality the same. And in many ways, our product is easier to use because here the grip and all is fixed. It's a pin which vibrates, so you have to hold it in a very particular manner. The device that I'm showing called UltraCane on the left. But on the other hand, even at this price, it's not something which people can afford to buy themselves. So that's the challenge of affordability, and I will revisit it when we talk about the challenges in this space. Let me go to the second mobility device that we have done. And this mobility device is something which allows a blind person to board a public bus independently. Very difficult challenge, and there are two major parts. One of them is a global challenge. How do you find the route number of the bus that is coming? So I'm assuming a blind person who can hear, so he or she can hear that a bus is approaching the bus stop. But when there are, so many number of buses that are route numbers that are using that bus stop. So you need to know what is the route number of that bus. This is a global problem, but that's another problem which is quite unique to our situation, that the buses do not come and stop in the bay for various reasons. Some, not only drivers, discipline of the drivers, but also the fact that they are slow moving vehicles like autos and they cannot maneuver out of it. They have people, hawkers, they also sometimes a lot of crowd at the bus stop. All of this makes. So what we did was, when we started this project, so this problem was told to us. So we said how real it is. We actually took a lot of videos of people boarding buses. And we found out that if you want to actually cover 95% of the boardings, you have to actually be covered 25 meters. So 25 meters may be the distance which a person has to walk to be able to catch the bus. One is walk, second is walk towards what? Because walk towards the entry door of the bus. Where is the entry door of the bus? And this is a very difficult challenge, because it's also a very unsafe part of the journey, because the bus has come and multiple buses can come. And then you have to locate what the entry door is and walk. And this is clearly not a problem in an environment like this, where the bus will always come and stop in the bay. Please remember, today metros do it. Metros come and stop. So for the blind people, using a metro is relatively much easier, because the entry door is very clearly marked, with the tactile tiles, and it only comes and stops there. But buses stop anywhere. They stop on the second lane. And, in this country, northern cities have, the behavior is much more difficult than even southern cities. And so there's a problem that exists of how do we board a public bus. We again came up with a very unique solution. So there are two devices. One is a bus unit, another is a user unit. These are not to scale. Please remember this. Bus unit has a small embedded device. It's also a transponder. Works at 433 megahertz, which is a frequency at which you can, toys and all can also work, the allowed band. And in this, we actually communicate and with this device, and we are able to solve this problem of finding the route number as also finding the entry door. So the two problems that we simultaneously solve using this particular device. We have conducted this in, at least two major pilot trials have happened. The first one, what you see on the top, is the earlier one, which was actually conducted in Mumbai. We fitted this on 25 buses on 2 route numbers from Back Bay Depot, and have 21 users who were trained to use it. We did 100 accompanied boardings, where somebody was accompanying them and they did the boarding, and then it was supervised boardings, and then 350 unsupervised boardings. That means they were asked to go to a particular stop, take the bus and get down at. So they were also asked to do two things. When they reached the stop, they were asked to note down the time that they actually have reached the stop. And when they got the bus, they had to note down the time. And looking at this time difference, we know, and looking at the route frequency, we knew whether they could actually get the first bus or they missed the first bus. And we found that in 350 boardings, 92 percentile of the time, they were able to, 92% of the time, they were able to actually board the first bus on the route. Very high success. Even the 8% failures were actually, many of them may have been due to the buses being changed and not being fitted with this device, because the depots always do some rerouting. So we would not know about this, whether the failures were really that these people could not locate the bus properly and board in time. So these devices, at that time, we were using our own battery. So what you see on the top right, but then we have miniaturized it, and now we work with the bus battery, and we conducted these trials on what are called orange cluster buses in Delhi. We again tried it with 23 buses with similar results in Delhi. And now it's a very miniaturized device. And in 15 minutes, we can actually fix this onto a bus. I will show you a small video.
One, two, one. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1.
Yeah, so this was actually a video from Mumbai in the actual trials, where this person was able to board this bus 121 and 134. These are the 2 route numbers on which we have installed the device. So this one was successful. We could sort of show the functionality of the device. And we also got promises that it will get installed. We also have a letter from BEST that they want it on all their buses, but unfortunately, no funding is available to be able to do that, because clearly this is not a commercial thing. Finally, it has to happen as a regulatory requirement, because it's not that so many people will board the buses so that we will actually get a commercial use of it. Of course, the situation today is because of not being able to board, so the number of blind people who use public buses is minuscule. So, which you can see that their employment opportunities, their education opportunities, all of these get limited because most of the cities to towns only have public buses. So this is again a challenge that we talk about. I shift gear and talk a little bit about the education, the work that we have been doing for making education accessible to the blind. So many of you may be familiar with Braille. So Braille is a very popular script. It's not a language. So you still need to know the language. So there is an English Braille, there is a Hindi Braille, there is a Tamil Braille and a Kannada Braille. 240 languages across the world use Braille. So that way it is perhaps the most popular script for languages over there. But Braille is good for, text. What do you do with diagrams? When we started working on this, and we also had opportunity to visit blind organizations outside this country, we were really shocked to find that we literally did not have any diagram, any process within the country for making bulk diagrams. Blind schools, blind organizations had some tactile diagrams, but they were all in-house produced, and they were all meant for their own students, and they will just they cannot mass produce them. They will just keep them and they will show it to them and then keep it back. It all dependent on the seriousness, commitment of the instructors to make these diagrams accessible to the visually impaired. Clearly, this is not scalable. It's like teaching without publishing books, but teaching with the handwritten notes of the instructor. If that's the only way teaching is to be done, we can see where we would have been in terms of education. So we started on a project, and this was supported by METI, and the reason was this was happening was not that globally this technology was not available. It's a very well-known technology for more than 5-6 decades. Very nice books are available outside for people with blindness. All science subjects, all diagrams, everything is available, except that the process that they were using for producing it was very expensive. It was costing almost 150 rupees a page. So the net effect was that it was not replicated in this country. Government has spent a lot on Braille presses. There are high-speed Braille presses which have been imported and available in almost all states. And they produce these Braille books rather cheap, inexpensive. But the problem is, imagine a book that a sighted child is studying and another book that a blind child is studying. The only thing missing is the diagrams. Can you see that? Can the person make anything head or tail out of it? So if you don't have diagrams in science books or geometry books or geography books, what will you do with those books? So this was actually the situation that prevails even till now in large parts of India. So the students don't have access to any diagrams. So we started working on it. We started an end-to-end. We developed a process for making books which are low-cost books, and we are very happy to say that we actually managed to. And then we tried to work with the Braille presses or publishers to see whether they would like to take it out, but we just didn't see any enthusiasm on their part. So we finally ended up doing, but our project people who were working on our project and some of our students who were working on it were very enthusiastic, and we managed to do a non-profit startup 2 years back, and today it's called Racelines Foundation. And today it's producing a large number of books, titles. We work very closely with NCERT, and we already have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, but 6th to 12th science and maths books, tactile books will be available. Most of it is already available, a few of them missing. I think class 8th is still being done. And so these books will all be available for people following the NCERT syllabus. Of course, a lot of work needs to be done because every state has their own syllabus, and there are many of these blind schools which actually teach children there. So the net result is very few children who are blind or visually impaired actually get into science education. They can't study science, they can't study economics, they can't study geography. So most of them are expected to study languages or history, or basically subjects which do not have much diagrams or mathematics. So this is, but today we are working for a very large number of organizations across the country and trying to make tactile books for them. What was the change point? The change point was that this is a book that is what you see on the left is produced by American Printing House, which is on there, and this is produced by us. So which is a huge difference in terms of at what price. And I think even this price we can be reduced by half once we have the right materials indigenously procured for some of the things. The last part before I sort of stop for a break is the work that we have done with what's called a refreshable braille display. Again, refreshable braille display is an old technology, has been available globally for at least for 4 decades. But they all use something called piezoelectric actuators. So this, so basically, it's if you have to access any digital content, you need this type of a display. If you don't want to print it on a paper in braille and read it, and clearly today you cannot do that. We can't take all our emails and start printing and reading. So that doesn't make sense. So why does a blind person the same thing? He's going to be digitally active. So he has or she has to do the same. So you need these braille displays on which these braille characters are formed, and then it gets refreshed and new set of lines or new text can come up on the same cells. So this is the technology again, but the problem was this technology was piezoelectric based actuators were so patented and it was so expensive, so that in India there hardly a handful of people had access to such refreshable braille displays. So we started working on it, and some very bright mechanical engineering students from IIT Delhi, they spent a lot of time in both of designing. We went through 3 iterations of this design, and today what you see, the one at the bottom is what's a 10-cell latch design, which actually we have accepted it, and today we launched this product. Again, this project was funded by Wellcome Trust. Last year we launched this 2 products. One is a 20-cell display with a braille keyboard, and a 40-cell display with the QWERTY keyboard. So what you see on the right is almost like a full laptop. You can do email, you can do web surfing, all of this you can do on this device. So the situation is small volume production is on. Some customers are already using it, but we still have to get into bulk production because some quality issues that are related to the modules we are still sorting out. Hopefully in the next few months, it will get into volume production. So again, the change is essentially a device that is available internationally for 1,80,000. We are able to put it into the market for 40,000. Of course, one of the things is in all of this, the development funding, that R&D funding that we are getting from Wellcome Trust is charity funding. So that has also helped in reducing the cost of the product. It's not just the fact that we are doing it in India and we are doing it ourselves, but also this has also contributed. But clearly the focus has been to make a device which is affordable. This is where we stand. So I talked about the various products that have come out of the lab. So the SmartCane, we have 80,000 devices sold and 1,700 devices in 22 countries. On board, I talked about trials in Mumbai and Delhi. We are waiting for funding for large installation. Racelines Foundation, we are actively producing 30 titles, 2,000 diagrams, and 150,000 sheets that we have done till now. And Dotbook was launched volume production to begin. Okay. So this is where I would maybe take a break and invite some questions and hand over to Anil.
Thank you, Bala. That was very nice. Of course, we are open for questions. There are not many questions right now in the Q&A box. Guru Prasad does want to contact you, so I think perhaps Dr. Sushila would be able to share your contact information with those who are interested. As you and I are aware, this business of doing work in assistive technologies requires many more people. We are still not at critical mass in terms of having enough involvement across the engineering community. Do you have any thoughts to share on that, on how we might be able to increase that?
No, I think it's a challenge. So I think the user community in India is quite large, and they are also getting very technically savvy and very demanding also. So that's a good part of it. So, we need to have more and more events, more and more places. So I do see now a lot of interest in both government as well as in, even the things like Social Alpha coming in, where they are actually encouraging such activities. So I see a very positive trend. But clearly, for the challenges that we still have the technical community that is involved is very small. So I think we still need, so two things have to change. And maybe I will keep this question for the end, because I'm coming to a slide where I will, essentially talk about the challenges for this.
One of the questions is whether speech to braille will be a useful device. Would it help at all if you converted from speech to braille?
It can be in certain circumstances, speech to braille can be useful. No, because let us say, you are, so the problem is for deaf and blind, clearly the braille is the only solution. So even if you are attending a class and you want to, deaf and blind person has to listen to it. So the speech to braille can be extremely helpful, because the braille is something that they can do, and deaf and blind is a small community, but it's a very important community, because a lot of technology that has come from deaf and blind has actually gone to both deaf and blind. It gives a, so one of the challenges has been popularizing braille itself after the speech and audio output has become so common in all our devices, whether it is a mobile and so on and so forth. So the number of people, especially the late blind, are almost not learning any braille. But people are very clear that people who are early blind or people who are by birth congenitally blind, they need to learn braille, because education is incomplete without braille, because you still need to be able to form sentences, phrase sentences, and so on. So I think it's important that braille is there. So one can see that speech to braille has some certain use, but just a blind person, perhaps not, but definitely for deaf and blind, it makes sense.
I think you're absolutely right that, deaf blind is a community that is a subset of the visually impaired and the hearing impaired. It's like an intersection set. And the challenges for the deaf blind are significantly larger. If people have not had experience working with a deaf blind, you have to work with them, and it'll blow your mind actually, because they've been able to cope with the loss of two senses. And you can just imagine how their brains have reorganized themselves to be able to do this. One of the questions that I had when I was going through listening to your presentation, and maybe you can comment on this, is that very early on I realized that it had not occurred to me that a child who is visually impaired must learn to read forwards and write backwards. And I think in that sense, braille is harder. It's because you have to flip the paper around to read
Absolutely,
it.
yeah.
Right. So maybe you could comment on that. I'm not sure many of the listeners would have.
So that also makes this electronic devices, braille displays, extremely popular, because you don't have to do that. Because in a normal braille slate, what people use is, if you have to manually write, you have to actually manually write on a piece of paper, and you turn it around and write. So you have to write the reverse way to read it. Okay, so that makes it even more complicated in terms of learning braille. But once you start learning braille using the braille displays, braille devices, then that particular problem is solved, because you are typing rather than writing on the back of the sheet. But just to take your previous question, so our, so the SmartCane also has some clientele among the deaf and blind. So when we did this SmartCane, and so one of the features here is we use sound for two things. We use sound for tell the battery level to the blind person. So when you switch on the device, it actually beeps. And whether it gives 1 beep, 2 beep, or 3 beep defines what is the level of the battery. 3 beeps means above 70%, 2 beeps means 30 to 70, and 1 beep means below 30, and you need to recharge. Because normally the charge lasts for 15 hours of usage. When we did this, and then when we tested it in Helen Keller, so one of the big issues, first issues came is that rest of the device is nice, it vibrates, so I can find out, but what do? I don't know what the charge level is. So then we had to end it up. Finally, the solution was quite simple. We also, along with the beep, we also make it vibrate. Okay, one by, multiple vibrations, and with the vibrations we convey the same information. But this came as a feedback from Helen Keller. So you have to think. So other thing is in ST technology, sometimes very simple extensions can make it usable to multiple disabilities. And this is something one has to be sensitive to it. I talked about this onboard, and it has a very interesting feedback, and that I think many of the audience may like it. So after we had done all the testing, we went to the general manager of BEST because they provided us this depot facility, and they were also charging the battery. At that time, we were not using the bus battery; we were having our own battery. So their depot, they had to charge it once in 3-4 days. So he said that you should not just think about blind, you can give it to a lot more older people, pregnant women, and so on. And we were surprised that, because we were saying that, okay, you can read the route number and you can find the entry door. Both these things are something anybody who has a sight can do. He says, because your device actually speaks, it actually alerts the driver and the conductor that somebody with special needs want to enter the bus. And he or she will look for, the driver or conductor will look for that person. I say somebody who is an older person and he cannot join the crowd to get into the bus, but he's taking more time and he doesn't want to risk himself by pushing into the bus, or even a pregnant woman. So they can also use this device because this makes the, and this was a feedback which came to him from the drivers and the conductors, which he passed it on. So I thought it was a wonderful use of the device for people who have temporary disability. It's not like they are permanently disabled, but they need time to climb onto the bus. So
no, that's absolutely true. It's amazing that sometimes the feedback we get totally surprises us. We are so tuned to thinking as engineers that we don't quite fully appreciate what we are working on. I had a similar experience, when we were working on these tactile diagrams. So one of the things, that perhaps I would ask you a leading question. This focus on higher education, tactile diagrams for higher education assumes that a person with visual impairment is able to get to that class. Whereas if you think of when we all first started reading, we would have started with picture books. And there are no tactile picture books for children with visual impairment. So, you're aware that I work with some of the organizations that actually create tactile books for children. So have you given thought to that aspect of it? Why not focus on early literacy instead of secondary education?
No, we are doing both. So we have now created coloring books even for children, and a lot of story books also we are working. But of course, our job is we don't focus on the content. We are only the, our presently. So we've always, we are ready to collaborate with, so there is we done with one agency in Bangalore, we are doing a computer book, how people who want to use a basic introduction to Windows and things like that. So we are doing now large number of books. So this use for the maths and science books came actually from the users, because we saw in our trials for SmartCane and so on, we came across boys and girls studying in schools, struggling with not being able to access books. So that's how, and the NCERT also showed a lot of interest, and they were ready to share their content. And and also from a perspective of, we also need a little volume to start with. And these books, if they get accepted by the government, you also get some volume because they will distribute it hopefully. So some of the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan states have started buying these books. So then it becomes a more sustainable in terms of an enterprise.
That's right. So let me, share my story for the audience. So when we created our first storybook with that was tactile, we gave it to an adult who was visually impaired. He was an editor at the Hindu, and we asked him for his opinion, and he said it was very nice, and he refused to give it back to us. And we said, it's a children's book. Why are you taking this children's book away from us? It's our only copy anyway. And he said, I have never had the occasion to read a children's book. So that is one good enough reason. But more importantly, I have never had the experience of reading a book to my child who is sighted. And that is a very careful bonding experience between parent and child, where, you know, the child is sitting on your lap and you're leafing through whatever book and reading a story. And an adult who's visually impaired is a market, because they want that bonding experience.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's very similar to the driver, you know, giving you feedback saying that, hey, wait a minute, you know, this device helps me provide a service. So I think it's interesting that when we go down this path of assistive technologies, we come across these stories that open our minds to the possibilities. There's a question here from Mr. Guru Prasant, who says he's in the operation theaters integration, and whether there are some assistive devices that could give some inputs to improve productivity.
Operation theater?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what an operation theater integration would mean, and whether there are some devices that could help. But perhaps maybe he can just send you an email, and you know, we can discuss with him further, right?
Maybe I will continue with my presentation.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? Yeah.
Okay, so the projects that are still going on in the lab, so they are more, I would say, some of them at the research stage, prototyping stage. So we may see some of these coming out in the next, at least something get released next year and so on. So we're working on 3 different projects. One on mobility assistant for visually impaired, we call it MAVI, reading assistant for visually impaired, and navigation assistant for visually impaired. So the MAVI is a device. It's an embedded device with cameras, and I work jointly with Professor Chaitanya Arora, who is has expertise in vision algorithms, and it's a very critical part of this particular device. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to recognize animals on the street. We are trying to recognize face detection for familiar faces, for signboard detection for Indian signboards, which could be hand painted, it could be multilingual, and some type of a texture detection for surfaces and so on and so forth, so that we know about what are the, you know, whether I'm walking, whether there's a footpath on the side or not. This is something that I may need to know. So this is a same video stream which goes through a number of classification and then finally gets merged and into control. So there are 3 parts of it. There is a camera, there is a processing unit, and then the interface is provided through the mobile, because we don't want to give another device, because typically now a lot of users at this stage have started using smartphones. So what it does is very briefly shown over here, and it's a prototype. So the prototype looks like this, and this is one of our research staff who is wearing the device. So the camera is the only one which is actually projecting in the front, and rest of it is still a prototype, so it's not optimized for users. So it will take quite some time to reach it, but it can actually detect things like animal. So you can see a dog being detected. You are seeing a signboard being detected, and then, you know, because these hand painted signboards, normally the simple OCRs don't work. You need to train them, because first of all, they are multilingual. You have to distinguish between the languages, and also you have to train them for the particular application. Okay, so, and you also have to distinguish the signboard from other things that are printed. You know, you may get across some other posters and things like that, and you need to be able to distinguish that it is not a signboard. The faces, so what you see on the left, and then this is the device section. So this is a project which is ongoing, and it is being supported by DST. Okay. So eventually the idea is that it will also link to the smart cane, because and can get mounted. So rather than the camera getting mounted on the human being, because the cane is a very nice position, it is in the front of you, and you are also scanning it, so it can give you a lot more information. But we have not reached that stage where we can completely integrate it. With certain alerts can be given through vibration, because that's another feedback. So one of the challenges in audio feedback is the audio is very low bandwidth, video is very high. So when you see an image, you see a very big picture, and you can detect lots of objects. But you can, first of all, not all of these objects of interest to the person, and you cannot have a blabbering device which keeps on speaking, because this is actually quite irritating to a person because not interested in getting the information that he or she needs. Talk a little bit about reading assistant. So we have a lot of PDF documents that are there. Making these PDF documents accessible is a challenge through screen readers. The screen readers are both, you have open source screen readers and you also have commercial screen readers. The screen readers essentially convert the text to audio and present it as you can read it. Except the fact that if you look at a PDF, because PDF has become almost standard for exchange, but the PDF is essentially designed, it doesn't have the markings that are required to actually describe the elements, because more designed for a printer, so it formats it so that you can print it, but then it's also become an exchange format. So we actually reverse engineer, we actually get the information which may have been created if the document was electronically created, but unfortunately has now got dropped in the PDF. So we have to be able to recognize tables, we have to be able to recognize images, and mathematics. Mathematics is a very big challenge. And also it's quite contextual. So, what you read. So if you have somewhere an equation and we say x square, you have to say it as x square, you cannot say x2, or even if you say x superscript 2, even if you're able to recognize it's a superscript, it will not have the same meaning, or the comprehension is going to be very difficult for a person who is used to listening to it as x square. So various other elements of this, so we are trying to recognize and make it accessible. So this is a joint work with Professor Volker Soji at University of Birmingham. And I recently got a Google Faculty Award to carry out this work. And these are the research staff who are working on this project. Another interesting work that we are doing is in making indoor spaces accessible. Outdoor navigation, even adaptation of the things like what Google provides, and there are also other software which give you navigation outside. They are getting popular even among the visually impaired. But the challenge is, once you enter the building, you are completely lost, because how do I actually now want to go to an office, want to go to a room, want to visit a particular place, or to go to the toilet? How do I find it? So this is a big challenge. And unfortunately, there are no standards also globally till now today. They're just evolving. So what do we need to do is we have to digitally annotate the map of the building. Navigation support we are doing using beacons. So Bluetooth beacons are becoming very common and very popular, and many devices are coming. And we provide a mobile app with suitable interface. So this is the indoor navigation work that we have started. There are many open challenges as no standards exist. But interestingly, our first installation, we are doing it at the Rajendra Prasad Ophthalmic Sciences Center at AIIMS. So I think it should be in the next few months. So a lot of testing is now happening. So after that, it should be accessible to the users to be able to navigate inside. So here, because it's a very large eye hospital, so you get a lot of people who may not be blind, because the blind people will typically not visit, but there are a lot of temporary impairment is there because of various situations that they are going through, accidents and so on and so forth. They may be under treatment, and so we do get a large number of people who are visually impaired in this hospital with a very large footfall. So this is a prototype that we are building. I shift gears. So this was something about the research that we are still on the drawing board. Okay, so still they are not gone out of the lab, except for some pilots that I mentioned at the All India Institute of Medical Science. Now I talk about, and this is what Anil was talking at the break, that so those of you who are interested in getting into this area or supporting this area, what are the challenges that are there? What are the opportunities which are very unique? And what are the challenges? So I talk about it in a couple of slides. Very unstructured environment and need for innovative solutions. So for example, I gave you the example for the smart cane, I gave you the example for the bus, public buses, locating the entry door. But even look at the indoor navigation problem. If you go to any public building, apart from airport and metro stations in India, you will not be able to reach, if it's a large building, you will not be able to reach the particular place you want to visit unless you ask a few people. Because even indoor signage, professional signages are missing. Airport may be able to board because they have very professional international quality signages that are available at the airports today, at least at the bigger airports. But that's not true for public buildings. So you have to, even somebody comes to IIT Delhi and want to visit my office, you would have to at least ask 2-3 people before you can reach my office, unless he or she knows that where do I sit. So this is, so what I feel is, so the solution that we are talking, just like actually a lot of people in India never had landline and they directly started using the mobile, the same thing will happen. So here with the indoor navigation solution, because of our unstructured environment, it actually provides an opportunity that we can leapfrog, and a mobile app can actually guide you to the place even before we install signages, professional signages, because that's expensive and that also requires, whereas an app distribution is much more simpler and less expensive. But then one has to be innovative because there is no signages. So if signage exists, then you can translate it into an app. But if the signage itself is not there, you need to create it. Extreme affordability. So assistive technology solutions available outside are extremely expensive. These are countries which are much more affluent where it is available. And also the society, typically the society supports. Everywhere it's very rarely that the person themselves pay for these solutions. Mostly it is some type of a government support or some charitable support that comes, which makes the person productive, and then maybe he can actually get employed and maybe also enjoy other things in life. So that way, the solutions that have been developed here, they are low volume and they are extremely expensive and they just don't make any sense. So it has to be, we are not just talking of 40% reduction, 50% reduction. You have to talk about 5 times, 10 times, 20 times reduction in prices to be able to talk about it. Of course, the opportunity, but fortunately for both modern technology, both electronics as well as software, fortunately scales well. So that way the high volume requirements, and we do have a very large number of people who need it. So the high volume requirements can actually be. Another interesting thing I found in academics is it attracts many students. Actually, many more students. Traditionally, I used to work in system level design, VLSI, embedded systems, but actually keeping my own students, IIT Delhi students, back for higher education, for PhD or for project staff was much more harder. They look at other opportunities in the Western countries and they want to go to US or they want to go. But when it comes to assistive technology, I've been able to retain a lot more of my students in my lab. So even from other departments, disciplines who come, they do stay back and try to complete, because it's something is they also see the impact of it. They also can relate to the problem much more. And you see that it also can be attractive to get students, good students, to work on your problems. One major challenge is there's no organized marketplace. So, if you create, most of the people are only creating custom solutions and low volume solutions. That's the norm, because there's no way that you can scale it up. There's no place you can say that, thousands of users are looking for such a device. There's no organized way. Even the ministry does not provide any mechanism for distributing it to thousands of NGOs that are actually spread over this country. Whereas the key to affordability is in volume in software and electronics. Need is high, but it's not the user who pays. And this is a very big challenge. When a user pays, you make a good product. If this actually helps the user to be more productive, more efficient, or entertains him or her, they will buy the product. Here's somebody else who actually has to pay for the product. Even though it may be sometimes in the family, somebody else has to pay, or some charity has to pay, or the government has to pay. And this creates a huge challenge, because it's not just the quality of the product, but it's also the fact that the person who has to make the decision has to get aligned to it. And that alignment may not be the same as user alignment, because user is one and somebody making the decision is other. For startups, even with a good solution, our product is difficult to survive because of this additional uncertainty. Governments have their budgets, and and they cannot give you any long-term sustainable market. Social sector is dominated by charity and empathy. And this is another area that we have found. So even when we did this tactile, we've thought for quite some time whether we should do a for-profit or non-profit. But it's almost, we realize that this area is so dominated by charity and empathy. Even the decision makers, even the people from the domain, they are all given their life to it, and they are not looking at any revenue targets. So the commercial activity is still looked upon. In some sectors this has gone, but in this sector it is still a big challenge. So that also in some sense hurts this, because more younger people who would like to do startups, they have to think of social entrepreneurship, and that is easier to survive. And that's not so easy for young people to make that decision. So what my advice is, people are looking at it, it has to be user-centric design, but not custom design. Don't make design which actually works only for one, solves the problem. Affordability, we already talked about, and keep our infrastructure in mind, because this has huge implications on both design and major implications on training and support. It's very difficult for any type of a training to be given. So one of the challenges in SmartCain is how do we train people, because though it requires only 1.5 hours of training, but something like a vibration is not used as a user input. It vibrates at 4 different levels, and that gives you the idea of the distance. Though it is intuitive, the vibrations are intuitive, but still the fact that it is not used in any other device makes it that it does need some training. How do you train people who are spread, who are in small towns, villages, and how do you reach out to them? They have no mobility. How do they come? These are big challenges. So in terms of training, that's why we created a lot of audio manuals and so on, but still the reach is a big challenge. So we created a huge network of NGOs across the country. So we have worked at a peak, we worked with 45 NGOs across the country spread over it, and trained trainers there so that they can in turn train people who come to this. So it was a huge exercise in itself. But now, of course, this has helped us in reaching out with our other solutions and devices, because we have now both a goodwill, credibility, and a network in place. But still what we are touching is a very small number. So 80,000 looks good for assistive technology, but considering there are 5 million people who are productive, and let's say most of them could benefit from using the device like SmartCain, but we're still able to reach only a small number. What started with undergraduate student projects has over the years grown into a much bigger thing. So today we have many research student problems that we are looking at it. So we started the other way. Normally you start with research and then find product solutions for it. Here we started with users and started with undergraduate students working on real products, refining them, and then we started looking at larger problems of, for example, Piyush has completed his PhD on mobility and navigation, and I think he has perhaps, globally, perhaps a person who has trained more blind people in mobility than anyone else. Richa has worked, her thesis has just been accepted, so she worked on tactile graphics, making them more effective. We have 2 more students who are working. One is working on making maths accessible. So he himself is a low vision student. Akashdeep, who is working on this problem. And Vikas is working on indoor localization and navigation. So they all now very practical research problems. So there's also very other interesting thing that can come out. It's a very open area, and there are hardly any work that has been done, especially in looking at our surroundings. So you could also convert. It's a good area for conducting research. So as I come to the end of my talk, I want to acknowledge the support that, the work that I presented is clearly a work which, I'm only one part of this. The people who have helped me throughout. So Dipen Manocha is a blind person and person who actually has been a mentor, has been a problems provider, solution tester, and so on throughout our journey of last 15 years. Rohan has been one of our early students with huge commitment to actually making the SmartCain out of the lab. Was clearly phenomenal. Like that type of a commitment you rarely see in students who would like to do that. Professor PVM Rao is from mechanical engineering, as a co-founder of my lab, and most of our problems, challenges were in the space of design and mechanical engineering, and he has been a big support. Shashi is a managing director of Phoenix Medical Systems. Without that, you wouldn't have actually seen the products going out. Pulkit and Suman has worked tremendously on both the professional braille display notebook product, as well as in taking, now Pulkit is involved in taking the tactile diagrams to the field. Piyush has been my lab manager for almost 6 years now. He's managing the Race Lines Foundations, and is hugely interested, dedicated his career to working for the blind. So this type of a dedication you rarely get in other areas. Before I end, I should also make a pitch. So those of you who are interested in supporting education for the blind, so this is last year on Gandhi Jayanti, we released 3 books, including the book on the symbols associated with Mahatma Gandhi. So Racelines Foundation is a non-profit. It's also as a ATG certification. So if any of you would like to donate books to the blind school in your neighborhood or to any of through us, we also have a matching grant scheme available. So if you donate 1 lakh, we can raise another 1 lakh, and you get a tax benefit, and we can distribute books for 2 lakhs. Social Alpha has given us a 20 lakh line of credit to actually match the matching grants that we get. Onboard, I talked about Onboard. It has gone through citywide trials, but unfortunately, we have not been able to launch citywide. So we have done pilots. We have not done a citywide trial. Before we approach regulatory bodies, we would like to do a citywide trial and expected costs over a 6 months period. We have a manufacturer lined up, so we can do this 1,000 units easily. We can do the production and we can run a trial before we go. And the total cost of this project is around 2.6 crores. So anybody attending this talk has either that type of a connection to any investor or any, it has to be a philanthropic effort, because I cannot see this getting revenues. Unfortunately, most of the bus companies which are interested in it, they themselves are completely loss making. So they are not ready to invest, but they are ready to partner us. They are ready to support us in doing this installation. I will end with this talk with Assistech, where our goal is to reach to 1 million lives by 2022. So that's the goal that we work in Assistech with. So I will stop sharing, and now it's open for questions.
Thank you, Professor Bala. There is a haywire question from Jay Gupta. He says, I know a friend or relation how he looks like today, but suppose I lose my sight in 10 years and I see this friend. Is there any technology that tell me what the changes are that has happened, so that your hair has grown white, you've worn spectacles, right? Do we have anything like that that could actually tell me what are the differences to this friend who I haven't seen for 10 years?
Yeah, we have not worked on it, but yes, there are solutions, because many of these people who are working on face detection, they have looked at this problem, because the data that you may have may not be the data which is very current, and you still need to be able to detect faces. So they do this incremental change, and they can do that. And the AI has progressed so much. So if anybody has seen a demo, I can refer to this. There's a Seeing Eye, which is a Microsoft product. It's a beautiful product, and of course it cannot be used in the setting that we are talking about Mavi. But if you just click a picture, it tells you a lot of it. It tells you the age of the person, smiling, not smiling. So many things it can tell you about the person. And I'm sure it's a question of solving this problem specifically, and you will at least get somewhat of things like hair being black or white is, I would say, rather more simpler, but even more complex things can be found. But actually, we have not.
There's an interesting aside to that I often tell people, and this is from my own experience with my grandparents and my grandfather and my father, that we are all going to start losing our hearing. But when we go for that hearing aid, we go there with no data. That guy has no understanding of what we were hearing before we went deaf. Yes. So go get an audiogram done before you lose your hearing. Is what I keep telling everybody, right? So that you can go when you're 65, 70 years old for your hearing aid, you can say, this is what I was hearing. Make it sound like this. Right?
Yeah, otherwise what we get is, suddenly you are hearing something very different from what you were hearing.
Okay. You mentioned artificial intelligence, and there have been some questions in the Q&A about the role of artificial intelligence in creating solutions, and how relevant it is to both visual impairment, but I would extend it to all the areas of disability.
I think it's extremely important. So, see, one of the, let's say, negative thing about AI is that it does not give you perfect solutions. But a lot of things that we do, you don't need perfect solutions, so 80%, 85%, 90%, because in many of the things, 85, 90% will not work. You want, 99.9999 in many problems. But let's say when we are talking about mobility, yes, it will be good that every time a dog is detected. But even if, let's say, once in a while I miss it, I'm better than not being able to detect it all the time. So there is risk still associated, but the risk is substantially reduced if I'm able to detect. Because, for example, the type of testing that we are doing, because that's an AI engine, so the type of testing, so how much of a training data you have will determine, because you may see suddenly a dog which is a very small dog, or it's in a particular posture which you are not trained, you're seeing only the backside, or you're only seeing, some position. So it may not be able to detect. It may fail because it doesn't have enough training data to be able to detect it. But still the fact that it's able to detect, so that AI is a very good, so same thing that we are doing in Ravi, we are using number of AI tools to be able to detect things like, structure of a document. So if we want to be able to detect structure of the document, of course, is again good that. So the AI techniques are very suitable in many of these applications because some amount of failures are acceptable. Okay, so I would say that AI is at a stage because it cannot ensure 100% in almost, most of the situations. So it is better to use it in this, and so that way I would say that many of our problems fit well for AI. So it is a good case, and more the training data is, it will become better.
One of the questions by Prema was, is there any need for conversion of text to braille? I mean, a live conversion of text to braille. Do you perceive any need for something like that?
Yes. So text to braille. See so what happens is, so you get these attachments. In India, they're not popular, but outside people are. See, how would a visually person? Let's say you get an SMS. You are in a meeting. You get a WhatsApp message. You are in a meeting. How would you read? They have to read it through audio. Okay, so now if they are attending a meeting, obviously they are not sitting with the headphone listening to their device. Okay, and if they put it on the speaker mode, obviously there will be a disturbance. Nobody wants that. So just like we can surreptitiously see below our table and read the message, they want a similar solution. So there are places, noisy places. There are places where even though somebody who can hear, a blind person who can hear, he still wants output, which is touch output, tactile output. So there are solutions. So you get these small braille devices which are with Bluetooth, work with the mobile, okay, and which can actually give you a braille. So text to braille has uses, and also like, so there are also good standards available. Some companies have worked on it for different languages. So there are braille tables available for different languages. So we work with one company for our braille display. So there, of course, the translation is any of the web data, the text you have, you put it up in braille. So the text to braille is a very common feature on all braille displays.
I guess you and I will be aware of needing text to braille also in a classroom, right? I mean, where if you could get a visually impaired student, what is written on the board on a braille display, it would add so much value to his or her experience, because the student can listen to the teacher and also see what is being written on the board, and that's a very unique Indian situation where we still don't have everything online and everything on devices and so on. Of course, in the middle of COVID, we don't have classes, so that's a different situation altogether.
Even if let's say so the thing is, if PowerPoint slides you put, you're not reading line by line, because when you're doing with visually impaired, you're supposed to read line by line. So you can actually convert. Of course, here you need a OCR and OCR plus braille. So
actually, it is something that has been of some concern to us, because a lot of online instruction is through videos, which are inaccessible to those who are visually impaired, and not everything is caught correctly by closed captioning. And so transcribing online videos is an ongoing activity. I know some of my colleagues at IIT Madras are working on that. But the huge volume of videos that are being generated are becoming inaccessible to persons with visual impairment.
Yeah. So of course, they are as far as the TV transmission is concerned, now standards have come, and in India also they started adopting the standards. Some of our people have been very active in pushing. So now this captioning part is getting more and more acceptable. Outside it is many places it's a regulatory requirement. You cannot play a TV without that captioning. But India also it's slowly coming as far as the TV transmission is concerned, but TV videos are concerned. But yes, so YouTube videos, most of them have no captioning or no, but a lot of tools are being generated, and I think this problem will be solved in a reasonable period of time, because recognition of images is a big, so let's say, area of activity which people are doing.
One of the requests is, do you have an address to contact for the for donations for the Raceline Foundation? And maybe,
yeah, you can just, I will put in touch with this. So, so I could have put that, but it's pulkit@racelines.org. Just go to RLF Racelines Foundation. You will find our website. There are a lot of information available. That would be the simplest. Or you can send a mail. I can direct it to the right people.
So one of the remarks, the chat box says that, it's actually starting with problems is path breaking, which is unusual for us because everybody should start with a problem. But both your experience and mine has been that it's easier to start in this space from a user requirement and then expand around it. Do you have any suggestions to people who might be considering looking at the space on how they should proceed if they want to enter into assistive technology?
I think, you have to find an intersection of, so let me maybe just share something of how it happened in my case. Okay, so that maybe give you some idea. Okay. So at the first time when I met, so the whole thing started with Dipendra Manocha accidentally meeting me because somebody introduced him to, ask me to come. So initially I was never working on software solutions. So he wanted to make Emacs. So basically make it accessible. So the Emacs is a popular Linux editor. So he wanted to make it accessible. So at that time, there no Emacs was not accessible through the screen reader. So at that time, because I was not working on any software solutions, my whole thing was embedded in VLSI. My research was all around it. So I just put him in contact with some students, and I just monitor the students in terms of whether they are doing work or not. But slowly what happened was he came up with another problem, which was this, where this SmartCane came, and there I said, oh yeah, this is an embedded system. So, I can do this. So I got myself involved. I started writing proposals, got funding and so on and so forth, got students to do it. And very soon I discovered that the software part of it and the electronics part was very quickly solved. But every problem was actually required mechanical engineering. First of all, prototyping itself required. Those days 3D printing was still something very glamorous. Not everybody had a 3D printer like today. So then Professor PVM Rao, we managed to reach out to him because we now had to find a solution for this problem of, so we reached out to him. He was very sort of cooperative and got very interested in the problem itself. And then once we started testing, so then we realized that many times we are making a very wrong choice. For example, I will give you a very small anecdote on it. At one point it came that what color is the SmartCane should be. So first we thought, after all we are designing a device for a blind person. How does it matter what color it is? So, but they said, let's still talk to the blind people to see whether. So their question was very simple. Do you wear dress for yourself to see or others also to see? We also want color. And then we had to do a proper survey, men, women, everything. And then finally we honed on to the device is produced in 2 colors, one a variant of blue and one variant of green. And it was all done through proper getting a feedback from this, what they like and what they don't like. And because, so it never occurred to us. So the user-centric part became very, very important. And we were lucky that now 2 blind people completely work in our lab. They're full-time in our lab. They're posted from Saksham. So the user has become, it become very interdisciplinary. We have CS, electronics, mechanical, design, and users, all of them sitting in one roof. So that's a very big change. So which is helping in all our projects, whether we are doing indoor navigation or whether we are doing Ravi. I tracks somebody was an electrical engineering MTech and he was low vision and he wanted to do a PhD. He joined me for doing this because this is a lab where such things are happening. And he's one person who was, because he was sighted, so he has actually done a lot of differential equations. Otherwise, to get a blind person who has done so many differential equations is very hard. But with a proper electrical engineer who is now wanting to work on reading assistant. So these are, so users are very important. Interdisciplinarity is very important. And over a period of time, we decided that, and because we were in touch with users and they are always coming up with, why can't you do this? Why can't you do this? Okay. And so then, of course, obviously we still have to pick, we can't do everything else, So everything that people want because there are so many challenges that they have. But it definitely makes it that, yes, and in a place like IIT where you can reach out to people with a lot of expertise in different disciplines. And this is an area where rarely people say, okay, they may not completely get into it. Their research areas are still important, but they may are ready to give you some part of their time to at least discuss with your students and help you solve it. So that is, I think, is an important part of it.
One of the things that you touched upon was this concept of standards. And, maybe you could speak a little bit about that because we don't really have standards for assistive devices in India. And that sort of creates a problem in a chicken and egg situation when you try to raise funds for something or try to get onto government schemes. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, so of course, I talked in the sense of indoor navigation because, how do we represent the inside of a building? What are the key places that need to be represented, how they are captured? There are really no standard. There are no global standard. This is a place where Google has come up with something which is not complete. And then there is an agency which is actually trying to push for a global standard in UK. We are in touch with them. They have done some work, but again, it's very limited. So, but then even in other cases, because I had a lot of interaction with the Ministry of Social Justice, though not done very serious projects, but for example, sign language. Indian Sign Language is still a challenge, so there are, because the type of effort that needs to be done to make it a standard is, so which is, makes things very complicated because if let's say there were an Indian Sign Language which is a standard, is across India, all educational institutions in teaching sign language use it, then a lot of software can actually come. There will be a good volume that will be available. There will be a, but interestingly, these are things which requires a lot of effort and unfortunately not enough, I would say, intellectual input or organizations or people have got into it to be able to define those standards. So that's still a challenge. But I think it's happening and I think slowly there's more interest and it should happen.
There is one question from Rakesh asking if since captions and videos are in graphics and hence they can be easily converted to any language or even text to voice. Is that accurate that the captions and videos are in graphics? I thought they were in text superimposed on the video.
Text is superimposed. Captioning is text superimposed on the video.
Right. So it's already there as text. We don't really have to do extra work. I think our conversation was particularly about videos that don't have captions. And if you wanted to create captions for them, could that be automated, especially if they're in different languages and everything, which could become a research project by itself?
So the description, so the fact is that this particular caption is also, so you can have actually receivers which can actually convert it into text and separately give an audio out of it. So that's not.
Yeah. So again, coming back to our original conversation, I've seen some amazing videos of where people have made soccer matches on TV accessible to the visually impaired. They're enjoying the World Cup soccer through some means of figuring it out, right? And I think it's just amazingly exciting to see how when technologists get together to attack these problems, some beautiful solutions emerge that we had not quite conceived of. So, the IIT alumni is doing a great job by bringing together people who have been trained in technology to listen to you and get some of these observations out. And you have been speaking largely on visual impairment. Do you have any thoughts on any other forms of disability that you think might be of interest to them?
I think all the, whether it is hearing or whether it is, speech and hearing, because many of them, people who are hearing also have speech problems, depending on what age they got the hearing disability, if it's a, so there are, and I think Anil has worked on some of these things which are cognitive disabilities. So that's also a very important area. So I think there are a lot of challenges in this sector, and everything, locomotor. So, even locomotor, even simple things like our terrain is so bad that, wheelchairs which actually work across terrains is still a challenge. So, just because of the fact that the terrain is bad, the roads are, so the type of potholes, the type of unstructured environment that we have makes it much more complicated to have wheelchairs which actually work very well across this. So I think you take it any area, there are major challenges, and especially if it is to reach to the masses. That is a very important thing, because the need is there in terms of volume with unstructured environment. Because there is now a small segment of disabled who have jobs because of the way that, fortunately, now all this reservation that has come for disability is helping them. But still the problem is most of the people do not even live in those very, let's say, elite urban settings. And then, there is really a challenge of any of these devices which work well in their surroundings.
Bob, I think the clock is winding down and there are no more questions. Dr. Sushila, would you like to take over?
Thank you very much. This has been a very fascinating discussion today. One of our missions in the IIT Alumni Center, Bengaluru, is to make the world aware of the wonderful work that is happening in the IITs. And today we saw another excellent example of work that is just, even I, as an alumna of IIT Delhi, had not heard of. So this is something that we really believe we should be doing. So thank you very much, both Professor Balakrishnan as well as Professor Anil Prabhakar, for having taken this on and done this session for us. So today what we saw was the inclusion of the visually impaired and how technology can help them. We saw, I think, broadly 3 areas: the access to knowledge, the safe access to spaces both indoor and outdoors, and very importantly, addressing aspirations. Earlier, we were talking about how excellent, how very well the blind can play chess. So with sharp minds, with the ability and the capability that they have, why should they not aspire to do science or engineering? Why should they have to be confined to areas such as languages, history, which was the point that Professor Bala kind of started with. There are many, many other challenges, and but today I think the major focus of the work that has been done has been around these areas. When we had our industry IIT conclave in February, there were a few repeated themes that kept coming up. Amongst them was, if you solve a problem for India, you have solved it for the world. Another one was the interdisciplinary nature of solutions that we are seeing today, of implementations. It's no longer about the engineering alone. It's a lot about how you bring in people from different areas, bring them to focus on solving a problem. And so we heard that today as well in this case. We also saw the need for standards, and there was a short discussion around that. And very importantly, being user-centric, how users can enhance products and specifications to make them better applicable to themselves. And also how while we may design and build for the visually impaired, with small extensions, it is possible to address other disabilities as well. And very importantly, it just doesn't stop at the disabled. It is something that can apply to the general public as well. And the example was of the Navi product, as well as of the bus mobility module. We saw a lot about affordability, and up to 1/20th of global prices is what the work that you've done has resulted in, and that is absolutely fabulous. I think the raised lines work that went from 150 rupees per page to 20, and now on track to get to rupees 10 a page. That's absolutely fabulous. The dot book from 1.8 lakhs to 40 lakhs, again, a huge shift in terms of the price point, and that we need that to be able to address our challenges here. So we saw basically three areas: the cane, we saw the bus, and the mobility, and then safe mobility. Those are the three broad areas. And of course, the dot book and the reading and so on. So I'm wondering whether there is a case for an incubator for socially impactful work that does not today have a space, as well as for social impact funds, because those are areas that obviously startups who are in the space are struggling with. And perhaps, this is something that we in IIT ACB would like to engage with the IITs to understand if there is a role that we can jointly play to make something like that happen. This work is clearly high impact, and there are also, while unique to India because of our peculiar situations, they also provide opportunities, therefore, for some fabulous work for professionals from multiple disciplines to come together and apply their minds to solving these big issues. So there is a lot of opportunity and challenge for professionals from across disciplines. I just want to say, I congratulate you for the work that you've been doing, both Professor Anil Prabhakar and Professor Bala. I think you've been doing absolutely fabulous work. The goal of touching 1 million lives by 2022, good luck. And we really hope that you will be able to achieve that. And if there is any way that IIT ACB can be part of the journey, we'd love to do that. So thank you to our audience for being here, and to both our professors today for the wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Srishi. Thank you.